Hello and welcome. There exists a moment in history that changed everything. Not a battle, not a single catastrophic event, but a choice. A decision made collectively across centuries by an entire people to simply walk away from the world they had shaped for millennia. The Elves of Faerûn did not fall to conquest or plague or divine wrath. They chose to leave, and in that leaving, they transformed the very nature of the world itself. You stand now at the edge of understanding one of the most profound transformations in the history of Faerûn. The retreat to Evermeet. To comprehend what this exodus meant, you must first understand what came before. You must see the world as it was when elves were not merely inhabitants of the forests and cities, but the dominant force across entire continents. Travel back with me now, thousands of years before the present age. Faerûn looks different beneath your feet. Where human kingdoms will one day sprawl, elven spires rise into ancient skies. The forests are deeper, older, more conscious. The cities blend seamlessly with nature, architecture and living wood growing together in ways that seem like miracles to younger races. This is the age of elven supremacy, and you walk through a world shaped by their vision. The elves did not arrive in Faerûn suddenly. Their presence extends back beyond reliable records, into the misty ages when the world itself was young. Some scholars place their earliest settlements at more than 25,000 years before Dale Reckoning, in the days when dragons were still learning their own power, and the gods themselves were more active in mortal affairs. The elves remember this time in songs and stories passed down through generations that span centuries. They remember when they were alone, or nearly so, the undisputed inheritors of a wild and magical world. 5 great elven kingdoms dominated the landscape of ancient Faerûn, each a civilization unto itself. In the forests of what would later be called the High Forest, the kingdom of Irlan spread its influence across vast territories. To the south, Cormenther, which would later be known for the City of Song, ruled over lands that would one day become Cormenther and the Dalelands. Further still, Aravendar held the north, founded around -23,000, 900 Dale Reckoning after the Great Sundering. Its militant culture and expansionist ambitions set it apart from its more peaceful kin. Mearitter flourished in the western reaches, a center of art and culture that would meet a terrible fate, and Alefarn spread along the Sword Coast, established around -22,000, 900 Dale Reckoning, its people trading and exploring, reaching across the waves. These were not small settlements or tribal territories. You must understand the scale. Each kingdom encompassed hundreds of thousands of square miles. Millions of elves called these realms home. Cities of breathtaking beauty rose from forest floors and cliffsides. Magical towers pierced the clouds. Gardens cultivated over centuries bloomed with flowers that sang in harmonies understood only by elven ears. Libraries contained knowledge accumulated across millennia. written in scripts so elegant that the very letters seemed to dance across the page. The elves had achieved something remarkable. They had created civilizations that existed in harmony with the natural world rather than in opposition to it. Their cities did not scar the landscape, but enhanced it. Their magic did not tear at the fabric of reality, but wove itself into the natural flows of energy that coursed through Faerûn. They had mastered arts that other races would struggle to comprehend for thousands of years to come. But this dominance came with a cost that the elves themselves did not initially recognize. In their long lives and ancient traditions, they had grown comfortable, perhaps even complacent. They had forgotten what it meant to struggle, to adapt quickly, to change with changing times. Their very longevity became a weakness. For when you have centuries to make decisions, you lose the urgency that drives innovation and transformation. The elves saw other races as fleeting. Humans, when they first appeared in significant numbers, seemed like children. They lived such brief lives, dying before they could accumulate real wisdom. Dwarves, though longer lived, remained focused on stone and metal, concerns the elves viewed as limited and earthbound. Halflings kept to themselves, seemingly content with simple pleasures. Orcs and goblinoids were viewed as mere nuisances, savage races to be pushed back into the wilderness when they became too bold. This perspective shaped Elven society for thousands of years. They did not see rivals in these younger races. They saw temporary tenets of a world that would always belong to elves. The future stretched before them, endless and unchanging, a continuation of the golden age they had already achieved. You walk through the streets of what would one day be called Myth Draenor in those ancient days, though it bore a different name then, before its transformation. Towers of crystal and living wood rise around you. Elven citizens move with grace that seems almost like dance, their conversations occurring in melodic tones that carry meanings far beyond mere words. Magic suffuses everything. Street lamps that light themselves at dusk, fountains that play water in impossible patterns. Gardens where every plant has been cultivated, not just for beauty, but for the specific emotional resonance it creates in those who view it. The elves had time for such refinements. A single garden might be planned by one generation, planted by the next, and reach its full glory only after the third generation of gardeners had taken up the work. Buildings took centuries to construct, each stone placed with perfect precision, each spell weave crafted to last for ages. Art was not created quickly, but developed over lifetimes, with apprentices studying under masters for a century before being considered ready to work independently. This was the height of Elven civilization. They had achieved a level of cultural and magical sophistication that seemed untouchable, eternal. They had shaped their world into a reflection of their values, their aesthetics, their very souls, and they believed, with the certainty that comes from thousands of years of unbroken success, that this would continue forever. But you can sense it now if you pay attention. The first cracks in the foundation, the subtle signs that this golden age carries within it the seeds of its own transformation. Not destruction necessarily, but change, inevitable, inexorable change. The human populations are growing. Slowly at first, but with a speed that alarms those few elves who pay attention to such things. Humans breed quickly compared to elves, a new generation every few decades rather than every century. They adapt to new environments with remarkable flexibility. They learn magic and craft, developing their own traditions rather than simply copying elven methods. They are, in a word, dynamic in ways that elven society has not been for millennia. More troubling still are the internal tensions within elven society itself. The kingdoms do not always agree. Philosophical differences about how to engage with the world, about the proper use of magic, about the relationship between civilization and nature. These debates have existed for centuries, but they are growing more heated, more divisive. The long memory of elves, usually considered a gift, becomes a curse when ancient grievances remain fresh across generations. Arivandar, in particular, troubles the other kingdoms. Its militant culture and expansionist philosophy clash with the more contemplative approaches of realms like Mirrodin. Aravandaran elves speak of elven destiny, of the right to rule over all the lands and all the lesser races. They build armies and practice war magic. They look at the borders of their kingdom and see not limits, but future conquests. Other elves watch this development with growing concern. The peace between the kingdoms, maintained through millennia of careful diplomacy and shared cultural values, seems increasingly fragile. Old alliances fray. New factions form. The unity that made elven dominance possible begins to crack. And through those cracks, darkness seeps. You stand now in a world that appears stable, unchanging, eternal. The elven kingdoms seem as permanent as the mountains, as enduring as the seas. But you know what comes next. You know that this golden age is already ending, though the elves themselves do not yet recognize it. The retreat is still centuries away, but the forces that will drive it into being are already gathering strength. The crown wars are coming. Humanity is rising. And the elves, for all their wisdom and magic and ancient glory, are about to face challenges they are uniquely unprepared to handle. Their very strengths, their longevity and tradition and connection to the ancient ways, will become weaknesses in a world that is changing faster than they can adapt. But all of that lies ahead. For now, in this moment of understanding, you simply observe. You see the height from which the elves will fall, not into destruction, but into retreat, into a decision to abandon the world they shaped rather than change with it. You see the glory that will be left behind, the empty cities and silent forests, the legacy of a people who chose paradise over persistence. The retreat begins not with a single moment, but with thousands of small decisions, accumulating across centuries, until finally the weight of them all tips the balance. And when you understand what came before, when you truly grasp what the elves were and what they had built, only then can you comprehend what it meant for them to walk away from it all. Section 2. The Fracturing of Glory. The first war between the Elven kingdoms erupted not with warning, but with centuries of accumulated tension finally breaking into open conflict. You witness now the beginning of what would become known as the Crown Wars, a series of devastating conflicts that would span more than 3,000 years and fundamentally reshape Elven civilization forever. The year is approximately negative 12,100 in Dale reckoning. Arrevendar, that militant kingdom in the north, has grown increasingly aggressive toward its neighbors. For centuries, Arrevendaran nobles have spoken openly of their right to rule over all Elven lands, claiming a divine mandate from Corellin Larethian himself. Their armies have been training, their war mages perfecting spells designed not for defense, but for conquest. And now, they move against Mirrodr. Mirrodr, the kingdom of art and magic, faces the full might of Arrevendar's military machine. You watch as armies clash in forests that have stood undisturbed for millennia. Spells of terrifying power tear through ancient groves. Elven warriors, who should be united by shared culture and blood, kill one another with efficiency born of centuries of martial training. The war is brutal, efficient, and utterly devastating. The conflict escalates beyond what anyone anticipated. The Miratari, facing conquest and destruction, turn to increasingly desperate measures. Dark rituals, forbidden magics, based on what fragmentary records survive. This could imply they summoned powers that should never be called into the world, seeking any weapon that might allow them to strike back at their conquerors. The exact nature of these workings remains unclear, lost to time and deliberate obscuration. But their consequences would prove catastrophic. You feel the ground tremble beneath your feet. The year is approximately negative 10,500 Dale reckoning, and something unprecedented is about to occur. High mages, their allegiance debated by scholars even now, cast a spell of such magnitude that it will echo through Elven history for all time. They call down what becomes known as the Dark Disaster. The spell transforms all of Mirrodr into a wasteland. Forests wither and die in hours. The very soil becomes toxic, incapable of supporting life. Rivers turn to poison. The sky itself darkens with perpetual storms. Hundreds of thousands of elves die, not in battle, but in magical catastrophe. An entire kingdom becomes uninhabitable, transformed into the blighted region that will later be known as the High Moor. Whether this devastation was deliberate retaliation by Arrevendar, or an accidental consequence of Meriters' own desperate magic remains a matter of scholarly debate. What we know with certainty is that the dark disaster marks a turning point in Elven consciousness. They have witnessed an atrocity of staggering proportions, the land itself weaponized in ways that violate every principle of Elven harmony with nature. The other Elven kingdoms finally respond with force. Alliances form against Arivandar and its allies. What began as a single conquest explodes into a continental conflict. You watch as the crown wars expand, drawing in every Elven kingdom, every major population center, every concentration of power and magic. The wars will continue on and off for more than 3,000 years, multiple conflicts bearing the name Crown Wars, each numbered and catalogued by historians, each more devastating than the last. During the subsequent Crown Wars, which continue through negative 11,000 Dale reckoning and beyond, the conflict spreads beyond purely Elven concerns. The wars disrupt trade routes, destroy communities that had stood for millennia, and create power vacuums that other races begin to fill. Human settlements, previously small and scattered, find new opportunities in the chaos. They expand into territories that elves can no longer protect or maintain. They establish kingdoms of their own in the spaces between warring Elven realms. You stand now in a human village that did not exist a century ago. It sits on land that was once part of an Elven kingdom's territory, but that kingdom's attention is focused on war, not on maintaining control over distant holdings. The humans here are not refugees or slaves or temporary visitors. They are settlers, building permanent homes, planting crops, raising children who will grow up considering this land their birthright. The elves, when they notice these developments at all, view them with a mixture of dismissal and irritation. Humans are still seen as lesser beings, their brief lives and crude cultures hardly worth serious attention. But the humans are multiplying at a rate that should alarm Elven planners. For every Elven child born, a dozen human children enter the world. For every Elven generation that passes, 4 or 5 human generations rise and fall, each building on the achievements of the previous one, each adapting to new challenges with a flexibility that Elven society lacks. The Crown Wars continue their devastating cycle. The historical records become fragmented during this period, making precise dating difficult. But the pattern remains clear. Elven populations decline not just from war casualties, though those are severe enough, but from something more subtle and insidious. Birth rates fall. Elves, already slow to reproduce compared to younger races, become even more reluctant to bring children into a world of constant warfare. The long Elven lifespan, once a blessing, becomes a burden as survivors carry the trauma of centuries of conflict with no generational reset, no natural forgetting that shorter-lived races experience. Philosophical divisions within Elven society deepen. Some elves argue for peace at any cost, for a return to the old ways of harmony and isolation. Others insist that only through strength can Elven civilization survive, that they must conquer or be conquered. Still, others begin to question the fundamental assumptions of Elven supremacy, wondering if perhaps their time of dominance is naturally coming to an end, if the rise of humanity represents not an aberration, but an inevitability. These debates occur in councils and courts, in magical academies and forest conclaves. The elves have always valued discourse and philosophical inquiry, but now these discussions take on a desperate edge. They are not merely academic exercises, but attempts to understand what has gone wrong. How a civilization that seemed eternal has found itself in existential crisis. You witness the toll this takes on individual elves. A warrior who has fought in multiple crown wars, spanning more than 1,000 years of her life, looks at her sword with weary disgust. She has killed hundreds, perhaps thousands, of her own kind. She has seen friends die, cities fall, forests burn. And for what? The borders shift slightly. One kingdom gains an advantage for a century or two, then loses it in the next conflict. Nothing fundamental changes, except that there are fewer elves in the world, and those who remain carry heavier burdens of grief and trauma. The rise of humanity accelerates during this period. Human kingdoms are no longer scattered villages and tribal territories. They are organized states with their own magical traditions, their own military forces, their own ambitions. From what we can piece together, the kingdom of Nethril, founded by humans around -3,859 Dale reckoning, develops arcane magic to levels that begin to rival Elven achievements. The Imaskari Empire demonstrates that humans can build civilizations of genuine sophistication and power. Elves still possess advantages. Their magic is older, deeper, more intimately connected to the fundamental forces of nature. Their craftspeople can create works of beauty and function that human artisans struggle to match. Their understanding of history and long-term patterns gives them perspective that humans lack. But these advantages are diminishing, and perceptive elves recognize this trend. Some human nations become involved in the later crown wars, not as victims of Elven conflict, but as participants. Human mercenaries fight in Elven armies. Human mages contribute their unique approaches to magic in support of various Elven factions. The wars that began as purely internal Elven affairs have become something larger, more complex, less controllable. Arivandar, that aggressive kingdom that sparked the First War, finally falls around -9,000 Dale reckoning in what becomes known as the Fifth Crown War. Its defeat requires an alliance of multiple Elven kingdoms and takes decades of sustained warfare to achieve. The destruction of Arivandar is total. Its cities are razed, its people scattered, its very name becomes synonymous with elven hubris and cruelty. In the aftermath, you stand in what was once the great capital of Aravendar. Nothing remains but rubble and ash. Magic has scoured this place so thoroughly that even the stones remember nothing of what stood here. The victorious kingdoms mark their triumph, but their celebrations are muted, somber. They have won, but they have also lost something irreplaceable. The world of elven dominance and unity is gone, shattered as completely as these ruins. Additional conflicts follow, sometimes designated as separate crown wars, sometimes considered extensions of earlier ones. The historical categorization varies among different scholars and traditions. What remains consistent across all accounts is the devastation, the loss of elven life and culture, and the irreversible transformation of elven society. You witness the exhausted peace that eventually settles over the elven kingdoms. The surviving realms withdraw into themselves, focusing on recovery and rebuilding. But the damage cannot be easily repaired. Vast territories that were once elven heartlands now stand empty, their forests silent, their cities abandoned. The elven population has declined catastrophically. Based on the fragmentary population records that survive, this could suggest that fewer than half the elves who lived before the Crown Wars remained alive in their aftermath. More troubling still, the wars have broken something in the elven spirit. A people who once looked to the future with confidence now contemplate their own mortality as a civilization. They see human kingdoms growing stronger, while elven realms grow weaker. They remember the beauty and unity of the age before the wars and recognize that such glory will never return. The weight of all they have lost presses down upon them, and many begin to ask a question that would have been unthinkable in earlier ages. Should we remain in this world at all? Not everyone asks this question. Many elves remain committed to their ancestral lands, to the kingdoms and forests and cities their people have inhabited for millennia. They argue that to leave would be to admit defeat, to surrender the world to younger races. They insist that elven civilization can recover, can rebuild, can reclaim its former glory if given time and peace. But others, increasingly many others, look at the devastation around them and reach different conclusions. They see a world that has become hostile to elven values and elven ways. They see endless conflict with other elves, with humans, with orcs and giants and dragons, a perpetual struggle that their long lives make unbearable. They remember a golden age that can never return and wonder if perhaps they should seek it elsewhere, in some other place, not stained by so much blood and grief. These debates occur in councils and forest glades, in the ruins of destroyed cities, and the halls of those few kingdoms that survived relatively intact. The elves have always been a contemplative people, given to long discussions and careful consideration, but now their discussions carry a new urgency. a recognition that decisions made in this age will determine the fate of their entire race for ages to come. You stand at a crossroads in Elven history. Behind you lies the Golden Age, now lost beyond recovery. To one side stretches a path of continued struggle in a world increasingly dominated by shorter-lived, more adaptable races. To the other side lies something else, barely visible yet, a possibility only beginning to take shape in Elven consciousness. The possibility of departure, of retreat, of seeking paradise not in the world they know, but in some other place, some refuge where they might preserve their culture and values away from the chaos consuming Faerûn. The retreat has not yet begun in full, but in these moments of exhaustion and loss and questioning, the seeds are planted. The idea takes root, and slowly, across centuries, it will grow until it transforms from speculation to plan, from plan to action, from action to the greatest exodus in the history of Faerûn. Section 3. The Vision of Evermeet. The island exists beyond the reach of ordinary navigation. You cannot simply sail west from the Sword Coast and expect to find it. No matter how skilled your crew or how favorable the winds, Evermeet lies not just in physical space, but in a realm slightly removed from the material world, protected by veils of magic so ancient and powerful that they seem woven from the fabric of reality itself. The discovery of Evermeet occurred long before the Crown Wars would devastate Elven civilization. According to Elven histories, explorers seeking new lands across the Western Ocean found themselves caught in a storm of supernatural intensity. The winds and waves should have killed them, torn their ship apart, and sent them to the bottom of the trackless sea. Instead, the storm carried them through barriers between worlds, and when the skies cleared, they beheld something that took their breath away. An island of impossible beauty stretched before them. Mountains rose into clouds that seemed to glow with inner light. Forests of trees with silver bark covered rolling hills. Rivers ran clear as crystal through valleys, where flowers bloomed in extraordinary profusion. The very air seemed to sing with magic, not the wild, raw power of Faerûn, but something purer, more refined, more fundamentally attuned to Elven nature. The explorers set foot on shores that had never known mortal footsteps. They walked through forests where every tree stood in natural harmony, where wildlife moved without fear, where peace seemed to emanate from the very stones. They climbed mountains and gazed from peaks across vistas that brought tears to even the most stoic among them. This was not merely a beautiful place. This was what every Elven realm aspired to be, the physical manifestation of Elven ideals made real. When they returned to Faerûn and reported their discovery, the responses varied. Some dismissed their tales as fantasy, as dreams born of storm madness and near death. The island they described seemed too perfect, too perfectly aligned with Elven aesthetics and values to be real. But the explorers insisted, and over time, other expeditions confirmed the island's existence, though reaching it remained perilous and uncertain. Corellin Larethian, the chief deity of the Elven pantheon, spoke through his high priests and oracles about this discovery. The island, they declared, was a gift, a place set aside for the Elven people, a refuge and sanctuary for when the time came that they might need it. The barriers protecting Evermeet were not accidents of nature, but divine protections, ensuring that only elves could find their way there, that the island would remain pure and unspoiled, until such time as the Elven people chose to claim it fully. This revelation sparked intense debate among Elven scholars and leaders. Some argued they should begin settling Evermeet immediately, establishing a new center of Elven civilization in that perfect realm. Others insisted that to do so would be to abandon their ancestral lands in Faerûn, to give up on the kingdoms and forests their people had inhabited for countless generations. The island was a gift, yes, but the prevailing interpretation suggested it was meant as a last resort, a final refuge if all else failed, not as an alternative to their current lives. For a considerable time, Evermeet remained largely unsettled. A few elves made the journey, establishing small communities on the island, but these were exceptions. The overwhelming majority of elves continued their lives in Faerûn, building their kingdoms and pursuing their long-term visions of civilization. The Golden Age still seemed sustainable. There was no urgent reason to flee to a distant sanctuary when home remained beautiful and secure. But after the Crown Wars began, everything changed. You stand now in the aftermath of the early Crown Wars, watching as Elven refugees stream toward the coasts, seeking any escape from the devastation consuming their homelands. The island of Evermeet, once a distant curiosity, suddenly becomes desperately relevant. Here is a place of safety, of peace, of everything the war zones are not. Here is hope. Significant waves of migration to Evermeet begin during the Crown Wars period. These are not explorers or idealists, but survivors. Families fleeing destroyed cities, scholars carrying what remains of ancient libraries, artists bearing precious works that represent centuries of cultural achievement. They board ships, not knowing if they will successfully navigate the magical barriers to Evermeet, knowing only that remaining in Faerûn means living in a war zone with no end in sight. The Elven deities aid these migrations. Priests of Corellin Larethian and Sehanine Moonbow perform rituals that temporarily thin the veils between worlds, creating windows of opportunity when ships can pass through to Evermeet with greater certainty. Still, the journey remains dangerous. Some ships vanish into the trackless sea, never reaching either Evermeet or returning to Faerûn. Others find themselves blown back to the material world, forced to try again or give up entirely. But enough succeed that a steady stream of refugees, establishes growing settlements on the sacred island. You walk the docks of these early Evermeet settlements. The buildings are simple at first, hastily constructed by elves accustomed to taking centuries to complete architectural projects. But even in their haste, beauty emerges. The elves cannot help but create with grace and proportion. Every building, however quickly built, shows consideration for its surroundings, for how it will look in moonlight, for how it harmonizes with its neighbors. The early settlers face challenges they never anticipated. Evermeet is beautiful, but largely wild. The forests must be carefully managed to create space for cities without destroying the natural splendor. Food must be grown or hunted. Trade with Faerûn is difficult given the magical barriers, so the island communities must become more self-sufficient than most Elven settlements ever were. This forces adaptations that some find difficult, requiring work and attention to practical matters that Golden Age Elven society often delegated to servants or handled through magic. Yet despite these challenges, Evermeet offers something invaluable: peace. You stand in a grove on Evermeet and hear no sounds of battle, smell no smoke from burning cities, feel no tremors from destructive magic. The crown wars rage across Faerûn, but here they are distant memories, stories told around evening fires rather than lived experiences. Children grow up knowing war only through their parents' tales, not through personal trauma. This alone makes every difficulty worthwhile to those who made the journey. Not all elves view the migration to Evermeet positively. Back in Faerûn, those who choose to remain often regard the departing elves with a mixture of pity and contempt. They see the migrants as abandoners of duty, as individuals who lack the courage to fight for their ancestral homes. Heated arguments erupt in families as some members choose to leave, while others insist on staying. Friendships spanning centuries end in bitter recriminations. The philosophical divisions run deep. Those who stay argue that Faerûn is the Elven homeland, that their people have a responsibility to preserve and protect it, regardless of cost. They point to the ancient forests, the cities built over millennia, the graves of countless ancestors. To leave all of this behind seems like betrayal, like admitting that everything their people fought for and died for was meaningless. Those who depart counter that preserving Elven culture and lives matters more than preserving specific territories. They argue that the Crown Wars have proven that Elven civilization in Faerûn faces uncertain prospects, that the rise of humanity and the internal conflicts among Elven kingdoms threaten their long-term survival in the material world. Better to retreat to Evermeet, they insist, where Elven values and traditions can be maintained in purity, where future generations can live in peace rather than perpetual warfare. You witness a farewell between siblings who will never see each other again. One has chosen to migrate to Evermeet. The other refuses to leave the forest where they were both born, where their parents and grandparents and countless generations before them lived and died. They embrace, both weeping, both certain they are making the right choice, both knowing that this goodbye is final. The magical barriers between Faerûn and Evermeet make return visits nearly impossible. Those who leave do not come back. The settlements on Evermeet grow larger and more sophisticated over the centuries. The island hosts several cities of significant size. The capital, also called Evermeet, rises on the eastern coast, its towers and spires visible from far out to sea to any ship that manages to penetrate the protective veils. The city becomes a center of Elven culture, a place where refugees from dozens of different Faerûn kingdoms mingle and share their traditions, creating something new from the merger of many old lineages. The political structure of Evermeet develops organically from necessity. The island needs unified leadership to manage the constant influx of new migrants, to organize defense against any potential threats, to make decisions about how to use limited resources. From what we can infer based on the settlement patterns, a council likely formed first, drawing representatives from the major families and the various Faerûn kingdoms represented on the island. This governing structure evolves over time to meet the changing needs of the growing population. You observe the tensions that arise from this mixing. Elves from different kingdoms bring different traditions with them. Those with martial cultures sometimes clash with elves from more peaceful realms. Differences in magical practices create friction. Would elves struggle to adapt to the more urban environment that some island settlements become? Every difference in culture, in magical tradition, in philosophical outlook, creates potential for conflict. Yet the shared experience of loss and the common desire for peace exert unifying pressure. Whatever their differences, the elves on Evermeet share a common exhaustion with warfare, a common hope that they can build something better on this sacred island. This shared purpose helps bridge cultural gaps and forge a new identity. They are no longer defined primarily by their kingdom of origin. They are, increasingly, simply Evermeet elves. The magical protections around Evermeet are strengthened through ritual and divine intervention. High mages work for decades on spells that will make the barriers more reliable, more difficult for non-elves to penetrate, more responsive to elven needs. Corellin Larethian and the other elven deities bless these workings, infusing them with divine power that ensures they will endure for ages. By the time these efforts reach their full development, Evermeet becomes functionally invisible to anyone not of elven blood, a hidden paradise that might be sailed past without ever being noticed. Still, the connection to Faerûn persists. Ships continue to make the dangerous journey, bringing new waves of migrants whenever conditions in the material world become particularly dire. News from Faerûn arrives with these ships, stories of battles and political intrigues, reports on which kingdoms are thriving and which are failing. The Elves of Evermeet follow these developments with intense interest, for they still have family and friends in those distant lands, still feel connections to places they once called home. Some elves on Evermeet propose sending aid back to Faerûn, military assistance to kingdoms fighting for survival, magical support for cities under siege, resources to help rebuild areas devastated by war. These proposals generate fierce debates. Those in favor argue that Evermeet has a moral obligation to help their suffering kin. Those opposed insist that any such involvement risks drawing Evermeet itself into the conflicts, compromising the very peace and safety that makes the island valuable. You stand in the council chambers as these arguments unfold, watching elves whose lives span centuries debate questions with no easy answers. They are trying to build a new civilization while maintaining ties to an old one. They are attempting to preserve their culture while adapting to dramatically changed circumstances. They are, in essence, trying to determine what it means to be Elven in an age when the old certainties have crumbled and the future remains unclear. The decision, reached gradually across decades of debate, is to maintain limited contact with Faerûn, but to avoid military or political entanglements. Evermeet will accept refugees. It will preserve Elven knowledge and culture. It will serve as a sanctuary and a bastion. But it will not intervene in the wars tearing Faerûn apart. This choice satisfies few completely, but represents a compromise that most can accept. As centuries pass, Evermeet transforms from a refuge into a true homeland. Generations of elves are born on the island who have never seen Faerûn, who know the material world only through stories and histories. To them, Evermeet is not a retreat or a backup plan, but simply home, the place where they belong, the center of their world. This shift in perspective gradually changes the island's culture, making it less about what was lost and more about what is being built. Yet the memory of Faerûn never fully fades. The elves are a people of long memory, and even those born on Evermeet grow up hearing tales of the ancient kingdoms, of forests that sang with magic, of cities of breathtaking beauty, now lying in ruins or abandoned. These stories create a complicated relationship with their ancestral lands, a mixture of nostalgia, grief, and relief that they are not there to witness its decline. Section 4, The Great Exodus. The retreat does not happen all at once. There is no single day when the elves of Faerûn collectively decide to abandon their ancestral lands. Instead, it unfolds across centuries, a gradual exodus that accelerates and slows with the changing circumstances of the material world, until finally, the last major populations sail west, and the Elven age in Faerûn transforms into something diminished and scattered. The pattern of departure that began during the Crown Wars continues long after those conflicts end. While significant migration occurred during the wars themselves, what historians call the true retreat the organized and systematic departure of entire communities and kingdoms, unfolds primarily in the centuries following the war's conclusion. The balance of power has shifted irreversibly. Humanity is no longer a rising force, but the dominant one. Human kingdoms control vast territories that were once elven heartlands. Human cities sprawl where elven forests stood. The world has changed, and it has changed in ways that make it increasingly inhospitable to traditional elven civilization. You stand in the court of Cormenther, the great elven realm in the forest, listening as high mages and noble houses debate the question that has haunted elven leadership for generations. Should they remain, adapting to a world that no longer centers on elven values? Or should they embrace the call of Evermeet, joining the thousands who have already made that journey? The debate is passionate, voices rising and falling in the melodic cadences of the Elvish tongue. Arguments honed over decades of similar discussions. The conservatives argue for staying. They speak of duty to the land, of sacred groves planted by ancestors dead for thousands of years, of the dishonor in abandonment. They insist that elven magic and wisdom remain superior to human achievements, that with patience and proper planning, elven civilization can endure in Faerûn indefinitely. They point to Cormenther itself, still strong, still beautiful, still a beacon of elven culture after all these millennia. The advocates for departure counter with demographics and lived reality. The elven population in Faerûn continues its long decline. Human expansion shows no signs of slowing. More troubling still, individual elves are simply leaving, choosing Evermeet regardless of what their leaders decide. Every year, more ships sail west. Every year, the elven presence in Faerûn grows weaker. The question, they argue, is not whether departure will happen, but whether it will occur in an organized, dignified manner, or as a chaotic flight. The debate reaches no final conclusion that day, nor the next, nor for years afterward. But the slow tide of departure continues regardless of what councils decide. You watch families make their preparations, sometimes in secret, sometimes openly, gathering precious possessions, saying goodbye to friends who remain uncommitted. They slip away to the coasts, seeking ships that will carry them to Evermeet, adding their numbers to the swelling exodus. The mechanisms of departure require careful magic. A ship cannot simply sail west and expect to reach Evermeet. The barriers protecting the sacred island remain formidable, designed to keep it hidden from all who might threaten Elven's sanctuary. Special rituals must be performed, specific prayers offered to Corellin Larethian and Sehanine Moonbow. Particular alignments of stars and moon awaited. Even then, the journey remains perilous. Success never guaranteed. High mages establish departure points along the Sword Coast and other western shores. These become sacred sites where the barriers between worlds thin naturally, or can be thinned through ritual. Elves gather at these locations, sometimes dozens at a time, sometimes hundreds, waiting for the proper moment to begin their journey. Priests perform ceremonies that last for days, weaving magic that will guide the ships through storms and mists to the hidden shores of Evermeet. You stand on one such beach as a departure ceremony unfolds before you. The ships wait offshore, their white sails furled, their elven crews ready. On the beach, hundreds of elves have gathered, some departing, some remaining to witness the farewell. The High Mage leading the ceremony raises her arms, and her voice carries across the water, singing in words of power that make the air shimmer with visible magic. The ritual builds slowly, as elven magic always does. Layer upon layer of spells woven together, each perfectly aligned with the others, each contributing to the whole. The mage calls upon Coralin Larethian, upon deep Sashella's god of the seas, upon Sehanine Moonbow, who watches over journeys and transitions. The gathered elves add their voices to hers, hundreds of throats singing in perfect harmony, creating a sound that seems to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of reality itself. The barrier begins to open. You feel it rather than see it, a thinning in the fabric of the world, a path emerging through the mists. The ships raise their sails, and winds that blow from nowhere fill them. Those departing board the vessels with last embraces, last words to those remaining behind. Many weep openly, though whether from sorrow at leaving or relief at escaping, perhaps even they cannot say. The ships begin to move, gliding across water that has become mirror smooth despite the winds. They head west, toward the setting sun, toward the place where ocean meets sky. And as they go, they fade, not all at once, but gradually, becoming less substantial, less present, until finally they vanish entirely from mortal sight. Those left on the beach remain standing long after, staring at empty horizon, knowing they will never see their departed friends and family again. This scene repeats countless times across the centuries. Individual departures, small groups, sometimes entire communities deciding collectively to make the journey. The great elven cities of Faerûn slowly empty. Communities that once numbered in the hundreds of thousands dwindle to tens of thousands, then to thousands, then to scattered holdouts. In 261 Dale reckoning, a significant development occurs. The settlement that will become Myth Draenor is opened to non-elven races, transforming from a purely elven city into something unprecedented. A cosmopolitan center where elves, humans, dwarves, and others live together. This represents one approach to the changing world, an attempt at adaptation rather than retreat. For a time, it flourishes spectacularly, becoming perhaps the greatest city in all of Faerûn. But this experiment, bold as it is, does not halt the larger pattern of departure. Many elves view the opening of their cities to other races as a betrayal of elven culture, as proof that traditional elven civilization cannot survive in Faerûn. the debates intensify. Some point to the cosmopolitan cities as the path forward. Others insist this proves the necessity of Evermeet, where Elven culture can be preserved in its pure form. You witness the preparations that occur in communities choosing organized departure. Librarians work frantically to catalog their collections, deciding which books and scrolls must be taken, which might be left behind, which must be destroyed rather than risk falling into unworthy hands. Museum curators face similar impossible choices. Thousands of years of accumulated art and artifacts, and only limited space on the ships. What stays? What goes? Every decision feels like a small betrayal, a piece of heritage abandoned. Architectural treasures pose particular challenges. The great spires and living buildings cannot be moved. Structures that grew from seed and spell over centuries cannot be uprooted and transplanted. The elves must choose between destroying these wonders to prevent desecration or leaving them intact, and hoping that whoever comes after will treat them with respect. Most choose to leave them, protected by spells that will slow but not prevent their eventual decay. Major departures continue through the centuries. Different communities and kingdoms make their choices at different times, based on local circumstances and the decisions of their leaders. The pattern is clear even if the specific timing varies. Elven populations in Faerûn decline steadily, while Evermeet's population swells with refugees and their descendants. Not all departures go smoothly. Some ships disappear into the trackless sea, lost to storms or monsters, or simply to navigational errors in the treacherous crossing. Some groups, attempting to depart without proper magical preparation, find themselves unable to penetrate the barriers to Evermeet and must turn back or seek other refuges. These failures create fear and hesitation among those still waiting to leave. But they do not stop the overall tide of exodus. You walk through an elven city in its declining days. The population has dwindled significantly. Streets that once rang with song and laughter now echo with your footsteps. Buildings stand dark, their enchantments failing without mages to maintain them. Gardens grow wild, their careful cultivation abandoned. The city is dying, and everyone remaining knows it. Various cities and settlements undergo final rituals as their last inhabitants prepare to depart. Some attempt great workings of magic designed to seal or preserve their homes, to place them into a kind of stasis that might protect them until such time as elves might return. These spells vary in their success, some maintaining their power for centuries, others failing within decades. What is preserved and what is lost becomes a source of endless debate and regret among the elves of Evermeet. They saved much. Libraries of ancient knowledge now reside in Evermeet cities, preserving lore that might otherwise have been lost forever. Artifacts of great power and cultural significance were carefully transported across the sea. Master craftspeople brought their skills, and taught them to new generations born on the sacred island. The core of Elven culture survived, but what was left behind haunts them. Entire cities with their architectural marvels, forests planted and tended for thousands of years, each tree positioned with deliberate care. Holy sites where elven deities once manifested, tombs containing the remains of heroes and monarchs, dating back to the dawn of elven civilization. All of this abandoned, left to decay, or to be claimed by others, the monuments of elven glory slowly fading from the world. You feel the weight of these decisions in every conversation among those who departed. An elderly elf who fled speaks of the library where she studied for 3 centuries, now empty, its remaining books left behind. A craftsman mourns the workshop his family maintained for millennia, abandoned with tools still hanging on the walls. A mother tells her children about the forest where she was born, describing trees by individual name, knowing they will never see those particular trees, never walk those paths, never truly understand the home she has lost. The emotional toll of the retreat manifests in different ways. Some elves embrace Evermeet with fervent enthusiasm, throwing themselves into building the new civilization, determined to create something worthy of what they left behind. Others fall into melancholy, spending their days staring westward across the sea toward Faerûn, replaying memories of places and people lost. Still, others grow angry, bitter at being forced to flee, resentful toward humans for rising, toward their own leaders for not finding a way to make staying viable. Major waves of departure continue through several centuries. By around the 10th century, Dale Reckoning and beyond, only scattered elven communities remain in Faerûn, mostly in deep forests or remote mountain valleys, places where human expansion has not yet reached, or where elves have found ways to adapt and coexist. These holdouts insist they will never leave, that to do so would be to betray everything their ancestors fought for. And for a time, they endure, maintaining their traditional ways in an increasingly human-dominated world. But you know, as they perhaps do not yet, that their continued presence in Faerûn exists in a changed context. Without the support of larger elven civilizations, without easy access to the high magic and accumulated resources that once protected them, these isolated communities must adapt in ways their ancestors never imagined. Some will indeed endure for centuries more, finding niches and accommodations with the changing world. Others will slowly dwindle and disappear, their last members either dying out or finally making the journey to Evermeet they once swore they would never undertake. The retreat transforms both Evermeet and Faerûn. The island swells with refugees, its population growing dramatically over the centuries. New cities must be built, new farmlands cultivated, new systems of governance and trade established. The mixing of elves from dozens of different kingdoms and traditions creates a new culture, distinctly Evermeet, rather than simply a transplanted version of any Faerûn realm. Meanwhile, in Faerûn, the elven absence leaves voids that others rush to fill. Human kingdoms expand into formerly elven territories. Dwarven clans emerge from their underground strongholds to claim surface lands. Halflings establish settlements in regions the elves once protected. The balance of power shifts fundamentally, and the age of elven dominance gives way to the age of humanity and the younger races. Section 5. The world transformed. The silence is what strikes you first. You stand in what was once a thriving elven settlement, centuries after most elves departed, and the quiet feels almost physical, pressing against your ears. There should be voices here, conversations in melodic Elvish, the singing of enchanted fountains, the rustle of robes as mages hurry to their studies. Instead, there is only wind moving through abandoned corridors, birds nesting in towers that once touched the clouds, and the slow, patient sounds of nature reclaiming what elves built. This is the immediate legacy of the retreat. Vast territories across Faerûn suddenly emptied or dramatically depopulated, leaving behind diminished communities and silent forests. The human kingdoms that border these abandoned lands react with a mixture of wonder, greed, and unease. Some see opportunity, rushing to claim territories and treasures left behind. Others approach with caution, knowing that elven magic can be dangerous even in abandonment, that curses and guardians might still protect these empty places. You walk alongside human explorers as they enter abandoned elven sites for the first time. They move slowly, weapons ready, expecting traps or monsters. What they find instead unsettles them more than any ambush might have. Beauty in decay, towers whose architecture defies human understanding of engineering, standing despite years of neglect. Gardens where flowers still bloom in patterns that create harmonies only partially comprehensible to human senses. Libraries with books written in scripts that seem to shift and change when viewed directly. The humans take what they can understand and use. Weapons and armor of elven craft, far superior to anything human smiths can produce. Scrolls containing spells that human mages study for decades, unlocking secrets that advance their magical traditions considerably. Gems and precious metals, stripped from buildings and monuments without understanding or caring about their original purposes. From the elven perspective, this appropriation represents a kind of desecration, though few elves remain to witness it. But much remains that humans cannot take or do not recognize as valuable. The living architecture slowly dies without elven tenders, but the buildings themselves often stand for centuries, monuments to departed glory. The magical wards that protect certain areas can remain active for generations, creating regions within abandoned sites that humans cannot safely enter. Some artifacts are too dangerous to remove. their power too great for human understanding, left in place more from fear than respect. The forests that surrounded elven cities begin changing almost immediately after major departures. Without elven management, they grow wilder, denser, less navigable. The careful cultivation that made these woodlands into extensions of elven civilization vanishes within a generation. Trees spread according to natural patterns rather than aesthetic designs. Undergrowth thickens. Paths disappear. What were once gardens become wilderness, and what were once ordered groves become tangled thickets. Some humans attempt to settle in abandoned elven territories, building their own communities in the shadows of empty spires. These settlements experience mixed results based on the historical patterns we can observe. The land sometimes seems to resist certain types of development, though whether this represents lingering magic or simply the difficulty of adapting elven infrastructure to human needs remains debated among scholars. Some settlements prosper by working with existing elven structures. Others struggle and are eventually abandoned, adding human ruins to elven ones. The political landscape of Faerûn transforms dramatically in the wake of the major retreat movements. Human kingdoms that were once constrained by elven territories suddenly have room to expand. They push into former elven lands, claiming forests and farmlands, establishing new provinces and duchies. The map of Faerûn redraws itself, human borders extending, human influence spreading into regions that had been elven for thousands of years. This expansion is not without conflict. Different human kingdoms compete for the choicest abandoned territories. Wars erupt over who has the right to claim former elven sites and the treasures they contain. Some of these conflicts become generational struggles. Human armies fighting over elven ruins, while the magic that once made those places significant slowly fades away. The irony is not lost on those few elves who remain to witness it. Humans fighting over elven leavings, sometimes destroying in their conflicts what the elves preserved through millennia. Dwarven clans also expand their influence during this period. They emerge from their underground strongholds to claim territories the elves once held. Dwarven practical sensibilities lead them to approach abandoned elven sites differently than humans do. They focus less on magical treasures and more on mineral rights, trade routes, and defensible positions. Where humans see wonder and mystery in elven ruins, dwarves often see stone and metal that can be repurposed for practical use. The relationship between humans and the remaining elves in Faerûn becomes complicated after the major retreat movements. Some humans view elves with increased respect, recognizing that a people who could build such wonders must possess knowledge and power worthy of deference. Others interpret the retreat as evidence of elven decline, suggesting that humans represent the ascending race. Still, others feel a sense of abandonment, as if the elves shirked responsibilities they should have maintained. Those elves who chose not to retreat, the holdouts in deep forests and remote valleys, find themselves increasingly isolated. They maintain their traditional ways as best they can, but without the support of larger elven civilizations, their culture begins to change in subtle ways. They must interact with human settlements for certain types of trade and information. They must make compromises on practices that were absolute in the age of elven dominance. They must, in essence, adapt or face extinction. You sit with a wood elf elder in a forest, glade somewhere in the depths of an ancient woodland. Listening as he speaks of the changes he has witnessed across his long life, he remembers when this forest was part of a thriving elven community, when more of his people lived among these trees, when they numbered far more than they do now. His entire tribe consists of perhaps a few hundred individuals, scattered across territories that once held much larger populations. They hunt and gather, maintaining their traditions while avoiding most contact with the human settlements that exist at the forest's edges. The elder speaks without bitterness, though sadness permeates his words. He does not blame those who left for Evermeet. He understands their reasons, even respects their choice, but he also knows that something irreplaceable was lost when the major exodus occurred. The connection between Elves and Faerûn, built over thousands of years, was fundamentally altered. The land remembers its former tenders, but memory fades without constant renewal. The forests are changing, slowly reverting to patterns that owe nothing to elven cultivation. On Evermeet, the elves face different challenges and transformations. The island civilization grows and matures, developing its own character, distinct from the Faerûn kingdoms that spawned it. Multiple generations have now been born on Evermeet who have never seen the material world, who know Faerûn only through stories and histories. To them, Evermeet is not a refuge, but simply home, the natural and proper place for elves to be. This generational shift creates tension within Evermeet society. The original refugees, those who remember Faerûn directly, maintain a connection to the abandoned lands. They teach their children and grandchildren about the forests they left behind, the communities they departed, the culture they preserved through exodus. But each successive generation finds these lessons less immediately relevant, less connected to their lived experiences. Evermeet has its own forests, its own cities, its own culture emerging from the merger of many traditions. The question of whether elves will ever return to Faerûn in significant numbers becomes a source of ongoing debate. Some argue that the retreat was always meant to be temporary, that when conditions in the material world improve, when humanity matures past its current phase, elves should reclaim their ancestral lands. Others insist that Evermeet is the true elven homeland now, that any return to Faerûn would be a mistake, a betrayal of the sacrifices made by those who fled. small numbers of elves do travel back to Faerûn from Evermeet, driven by various motivations. Some are scouts, keeping watch on developments in the material world and reporting back to Evermeet's rulers. Some are seekers, attempting to recover artifacts and knowledge left behind in the Exodus. Some are simply curious, wanting to see the lands their ancestors spoke of with such longing and loss. These travelers find a world transformed, often barely recognizable from the stories they learned. The magic of Faerûn itself changes after the major retreat movements. Elven high magic, those great workings that shaped the fundamental nature of reality in certain regions, begins to unravel without elves to maintain it. Some effects persist through their own momentum, continuing for centuries after their creators departed. But others fade more quickly, and the world becomes, in certain measurable ways, slightly less saturated with the specific type of magic that elven civilization cultivated. Human mages notice this shift and seek to understand it. They study the remaining elven magical sites, attempting to learn the secrets of high magic, hoping to preserve or recreate what the elves left behind. Some succeed in limited ways, adapting elven techniques to human approaches. But the fundamental difference in how elves and humans relate to magic, combined with the difference in lifespan and cultural continuity, means that certain types of magical working become increasingly rare. The age of elven high magic has passed, at least in Faerûn, though it continues on Evermeet. The cultural impact of the retreat extends beyond politics and magic. Art, literature, music, all the creative expressions that flourished in elven civilization, these things must now find new forms in Faerûn or exist primarily on Evermeet. The great bardic traditions of the elven kingdoms cannot continue in Faerûn without the cultural context that gave them meaning. The architectural styles that defined elven cities cannot be fully replicated in human settlements built for different purposes and aesthetics. An entire way of understanding and interacting with the world has largely departed with the elves. Some humans mourn this loss. Scholars and artists who studied with elven masters find themselves among the last keepers of traditions that may not survive them. They write frantically, trying to preserve in books and scrolls what they learned. But written words cannot capture the fullness of lived tradition. A half-elf bard, one of the few remaining who studied under true elven masters, performs songs in the old style to increasingly uncomprehending audiences. The beauty is still there, but the context that made that beauty fully meaningful has largely evaporated. The half-elves themselves represent a living legacy of the age before the major retreat movements. Born of unions between humans and elves, they belong fully to neither race. Most chose to remain in Faerûn when the major departures occurred. Their mixed heritage creating complicated relationships with both Evermeet and the material world. They become bridges between worlds, carrying elven blood and some elven traditions forward into an increasingly human-dominated realm. But they also experience the loss acutely, often more so than full-blooded humans, for they can remember or understand what was lost in ways purely human individuals cannot. You stand now many centuries after the major retreat movements, in a world that has adapted to the new reality of limited elven presence. Human kingdoms dominate the political landscape. Human cities sprawl across territories that once held elven forests. Human magic, while different from elven high magic, has developed its own sophistications and achievements. The world has moved on, as worlds do, adapting to changed circumstances and finding new equilibriums. Yet traces remain. Ruins scattered across the landscape, slowly crumbling, but still recognizable as works of a civilization that approached building differently than humans do. Ancient trees that remember elven tenders, still growing in patterns planted thousands of years ago. Place names in the Elvish tongue, preserved even by human populations who no longer understand their meanings. Fragments of songs and stories, distorted by repeated retelling, but retaining some essence of their origins. The elves withdrew, but they are not forgotten. Some of these traces hold power even in absence. This could imply that the magic the elves wove into Faerûn created lasting impressions that resist easy erasure. A human child born near the ruins of an elven settlement might find herself drawn to magic in ways her siblings are not. A forest that was once elven territory sometimes remains strangely resistant to certain types of development, trees regrowing with unusual vigor. Based on what we know of how elven high magic worked, we can infer that these effects represent echoes of old enchantments, slowly fading, but not yet gone. The long-term consequences of the retreat include losses that may never be recovered, knowledge that existed only in the minds of elven masters who departed without recording it, magical techniques that required elven longevity and patience to develop, difficult or impossible for shorter-lived races to replicate. Entire philosophical and artistic traditions for which no adequate human equivalents exist. The world is changed by these absences, transformed in ways both subtle and profound. But there are also changes that create new possibilities. Humanity develops its own magical traditions, different from elven high magic, but no less valid. Human kingdoms create political and social structures adapted to human needs, rather than attempting to copy elven models. The younger races, no longer living in the shadow of elven dominance, find space to define themselves on their own terms. A world less shaped by elven vision becomes more diverse, more chaotic, more dynamic in certain respects. The elves on Evermeet watch these developments from their distant sanctuary, when they watch at all. Some view them with satisfaction, feeling vindicated in their choice to leave. The world they departed has proven itself capable of continuing without them, suggesting their exodus was not a betrayal, but a natural transition. Others feel deep sorrow, mourning what they perceive as the diminishment of civilization, the replacement of elven refinement with something cruder. These debates continue across generations, never fully resolved because there is no objective measure by which to judge such things. Contact between Evermeet and Faerûn never completely ceases, but it becomes increasingly rare and ritualized. Ships occasionally make the crossing in both directions, but these journeys are dangerous and difficult, undertaken only for compelling reasons. The two worlds, once deeply connected, drift apart, developing separately while maintaining a kind of cultural memory of their shared past. Evermeet becomes almost mythical to many of Faerûn's inhabitants, a legendary paradise that may or may not truly exist. Faerûn becomes to many Evermeet elves a cautionary tale, a place of loss and decline that validates their ancestors' decision to leave. You understand now, standing at the end of this long exploration, what the retreat truly meant. It was not a single event, but a transformation that unfolded across centuries and continues to shape both Evermeet and Faerûn to this day. It was a choice made by a people faced with impossible circumstances, a decision that preserved much, but also sacrificed much. It was the end of an age and the beginning of another, neither wholly good nor wholly bad, but simply the path that history took. The Great Retreat changed everything. It ended the age of widespread elven dominance in Faerûn and ushered in the age of humanity. It preserved elven culture by removing most of its practitioners to Evermeet. It created Evermeet as a beacon of what elven civilization could be, and left Faerûn to develop without the shaping hand that influenced it for millennia. And in doing both these things, it demonstrated a fundamental truth about civilizations and peoples, that sometimes survival requires retreat, that preservation demands sacrifice, that holding on to the past can mean letting go of certain futures. The legacy of the retreat lives on in both worlds. In Faerûn, in the ruins and remnants, in the half-elves who carry mixed heritage, in the occasional encounter with wood elves who never left their forests, in the place names and fragments of lore that persist, in Evermeet, in the culture that developed from the merger of many traditions, in the debates about whether return is possible or desirable, in the stories told to children about the world their ancestors abandoned. The retreat is history, but it is also living memory, continuing to influence how elves understand themselves and their place in the larger cosmos. And perhaps, in some distant future, the balance will shift again. Perhaps elves will return to Faerûn in numbers, reclaiming some of what was lost, rebuilding connections that the retreat severed. Or perhaps Evermeet will remain their primary home, and Faerûn will continue as it has, shaped by humanity and the younger races, with elves remembered primarily through ruins and stories, and the isolated communities that chose to stay. The future remains unwritten, possibilities stretching forward in ways none can fully predict. What remains certain is this: the Great Retreat to Evermeet represents one of the most significant transformations in the history of Faerûn and the Elven people. Understanding it means understanding not just what happened, but why it happened, what it cost, what it preserved, and how it continues to shape the world you inhabit today. The Elves stepped away from widespread presence in the world, but their footprints remain. And in those traces, you can still glimpse the glory of what once was, and comprehend the choices of a people who prioritized preservation over persistence, paradise over struggle, the uncertain hope of the future over the weight of the past. If you found this exploration of the Great Retreat valuable, if these insights into one of Faerûn's most transformative events deepened your understanding of its history and peoples, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support allows me to continue these deep explorations into the lore that makes Dungeons and Dragons such a rich and fascinating world. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Elven history. And until next time, may your own adventures be filled with wonder and discovery.